Well, we got a big fight going down on Saturday night. Jake Paul scheduled to fight Julio Cesar Chavez Jr. in Anaheim, California on Saturday. Paul returning to action after his highly publicized fight with Mike Tyson. I think we all watched that one back in November, facing another former champ in Cesar Chavez Jr. Previously, he held the WBC middleweight title. We've all have eyes on the YouTuber turned boxer. He is heavily favored in this one. This will be Paul's first time fighting an active former world champ. Welcome in our combat sports writer for CBS Sports. We got Shakiel Mahjouri joining us now. Shall we say the Jake Paul experience is once again back? He's managed to make all of his fights just epic spectacles. So much of it coming into the lead up of the actual fight. His meeting with Mike Tyson, that was a record-breaking event that even crashed the Netflix servers. What can we expect on Saturday night in this one?
Well, I don't expect that any servers will be crashing. It's not quite, Mike Tyson, Julio Cesar Chavez Jr., not quite the same realm of historic significance. But this is a really strategic matchup that Jake Paul has organized for himself. He's been really keen on transitioning from sort of YouTube celebrity boxer to professional boxer. And this is the fight that might make it happen, because the WBC has expressed that should Jake Paul beat Julio Cesar Chavez Jr., like you said, a former active WBC middleweight champion, he might get ranked. And once Jake Paul is ranked, he has a legitimate chance to start working towards a title fight. He said that there's been talks with Badu Jack about a WBC cruiserweight title fight. Badu said that he would take that easy payday. So while this isn't the most hyped up Jake Paul fight, it's sort of the greater than the sum of its parts. It's a fight that puts him in contention for a ranking. It would be his first win over a legitimate boxing champion and someone who does have a fight with Canelo Alvarez under their books in Cesar Chavez Jr. So this is really the fight that Jake Paul is trying to use to show people that he is a legit boxer.
You mentioned the success that Chavez Jr. has had. Recently, he's coming off consecutive fights that he won against David Zagara and Uriah Hall there. He's coming in hot in this one. What do you expect out of him?
And it's hard to tell, because Chavez Jr. has sort of been inconsistent with his dedication to training. The fight against Uriah Hall was a former UFC contender, sort of making his early entry into boxing. It's hard to really gauge what that one means. I think the most important fight you can look to in recent memory is Anderson Silva, the former UFC middleweight champion, fought Cesar Chavez Jr., beat him by split decision before fighting Jake Paul. Jake Paul beats Anderson Silva by unanimous decision. This is the quintessential Jake Paul fight. It's an older guy. There's an 11-year age difference between Jake and Julio Cesar Chavez Jr. If Julio doesn't come into this with the full dedication, preparing for a legitimate fight, I worry that the age as well as Jake Paul's size is probably going to get the better of him.
Okay, so age and size. What other challenges does Cesar Chavez Jr. present to Jake Paul?
I think Cesar's best hope for winning this fight is to use his wealth of experience. Jake Paul is still a very novice boxer. He's gotten really good at fine-tuning certain components of his game, but it's still a very rudimentary game. If Julio Cesar Chavez Jr. at age 39, not being the most active fighter, can really step up his endurance and his cardio, I think it would behoove him to use his footwork to cut off the ring, make Jake Paul fight in a small pocket of the ring, and go to the body a lot. Jake Paul is still primarily a headhunter. He's got a great haymaker punch. He also has a good developing jab, but there's only really a few things you have to worry about with Jake. If Julio Cesar Chavez Jr. can overwhelm Jake Paul with input, I think those cracks in Jake's game will get larger.
Looking at the betting market real quick, Jake Paul minus 700 to improve to 12-1. Do you like those odds?
Yeah, I think I'm not a gambling man, to be candid with you. I think unless you're going to parlay something like that, I think the best things to look to are maybe Jake Paul via knockout, or at the very least Jake Paul to knock down Julio Cesar Chavez Jr. This might go to a decision. Julio's last few fights have, but he's got a lot of wear and tear. He's been active for a very long time. Jake Paul can crack. At the very least, I'd look out for a knockdown in this fight. Either way, I'm siding with Jake to win.
Got it. Now, leading up to that event, Holm is returning to boxing for the first time in 12 years. She's facing Yolanda Vega in a 10-round lightweight bout. What are you looking for in that match?
You know, candidly, it's hard to get a good read on Yolanda. She only has, I think, 10 professional fights under her record, 1 via knockout. Holm, 43, returning to boxing for the first time in 12 years. But Holm has a wealth of experience that should grant her an easy opportunity to win this fight. She's a boxing Hall of Famer. She's defended her titles 18 times in 3 weight classes. She is, for some people, the all-time greatest women's boxer, at the very least top 3. I don't know a ton about Yolanda, but I just think despite being 13 years younger, she has way too little experience to hang it up with someone in Holly, who even in the UFC was still primarily a boxer.
Well, this isn't the only fights on this weekend. So Paul versus Chavez Jr. is directly competing with UFC 317 on Saturday night. Dana White coming out, insisting that he didn't even know this was going on, saying, oh, really? I didn't even effing know that. I didn't even know he was fighting. So that's about how concerned I am. What's your take on Dana's comments? And personally, are you going to have 2 screens going for this one?
Oh, I'm just glad that WWE Night of Champions starts in the afternoon, so I don't have to have 3 screens going on at the same time. I think, you know, Dana's a promoter. He can be a little contentious, but I don't think he's lying in this case. Fundamentally, I think these are kind of different crowds, right? The thing with Jake Paul fights is they kind of have to tap into pop culture a little bit. There isn't a huge desire from boxing fans to see Jake Paul fight. Nor do I think is Julio Cesar Chavez Jr. the kind of person that's going to bring in a lot of casual interest. There's a lane for Jake Paul, and there's definitely a lane for boxing. I anticipate there won't be a ton of crossover interest between. You're either going to have mostly MMA fans or mostly boxing fans. And if they're going to tune into one or the other, they will tune in after the fact. If I'm not mistaken, I think Jake Paul's ring walks starts at 11 Eastern. The UFC main card starts at 10. So if you really do want to catch both, you can probably head over to the Jake Paul fight without missing, you know, the main event or the co-main for the UFC event.
It's a fun night in boxing, that's for sure. CBS Sports, Shakiel Mahjouri, we appreciate you here on theCUBE. We got some notable fights to keep an eye on this weekend. Boxing and UFC. Dana White claiming that he didn't even know the boxing fight was going on. The highlight for that one, Jake Paul versus Julio Cesar Chavez Jr. there. We talked about Holm returning back, going against Yolanda Vega. And obviously, when it comes to UFC 317, our guy Shakiel saying, hey, you can watch them both. Plenty of time out there.